Hi, Trey. How are you?
Hello, Sharia. How are you doing? And thank you for doing this, and thank Premier, and thank whoever is joining us wherever they are.
Well, I just want to say welcome to those who are joining us. First thing, just a reminder throughout the show, if you'd like to get a signed copy of Trey's new book, Start, Stay, or Leave, it's available at the link premiercollectibles.com/Trey Gowdy, and that link will stay up there throughout this show. So make sure you get a signed copy. Well, Trey, just tell us about the book. Why did you write it, and who do you think it's intended for?
Well, I wrote it, Sharia. I was in the parking lot of the grocery store with my wife Terry, whom you know very well. So it was a terrible mistake I made to go to the grocery store with her. But I met a lady in the parking lot, and she used the word that I covet the most, the word that I want people to describe me with at the end, whenever that is. She said, "We thought you were fair." And she thought I was still the district attorney, by the way, and I'd been gone for 12 years. She didn't know I'd been in Congress. Her view of me was just through being her district attorney. But I was walking back to the truck with Terry, and I thought, okay, of all the decisions, the decision to go to law school, the decision to pursue a career as a prosecutor, which you are now, the decision to run for Congress, even the decision to ask out the woman who was sitting in the truck, my wife of 33 years, life boils down to the decisions we make. So I got in the truck and I said, you know what? I mean, Terry had been talking to me about writing another book. And I said, the only book I feel like I have in me is a book about making really good decisions that get us towards our desired closing argument in life. And so it took me, over a year. I'm sure people have ghostwriters. I couldn't use a ghostwriter. Number one, I'm afraid of ghosts, but I couldn't use a ghostwriter. I wrote it, and it's my effort to keep people from making some of the mistakes I made, and try to encourage them to learn the lessons I learned later in life, but learn them sooner.
Well, it's a fantastic book. I certainly learned a lot from it about making decisions. But you said one of the things you talked about is having your closing argument in mind, and that can help kind of guide you to make decisions. So, how did you figure out that you wanted essentially part of your closing argument to be that people said that you were fair?
Well, I mean, that's not what I wanted my closing argument to be when I was 17. I mean, when I was 17, I wanted probably people to say, there lies the richest man in the world. Or, gosh, what an incredible car collection he had. But the older you get, the more you prioritize what really is important. Obviously, you want to be a good spouse, you want to be a good parent, you want to be a good friend. But when you're picking what you do for a living, and some people, me among them, are somewhat defined by what we have chosen to do for a living. And I just, particularly in the courtroom, but also in politics, I mean, there's not a huge appetite for fairness in politics. I mean, I don't know why I'm telling you that. You were in Washington longer than I was. I mean, you were in Washington for what, a decade? You don't hear the word fairness a lot, but that's the word I covet. I don't care if they say he was smart, because they're not going to say that. I'd love it if they said he was funny, but they may or may not say that. Fair. Because to me, fairness is, it's just such a huge compliment. And not to go off in a historical view of the word fair, but fair used to mean beautiful. I mean, I think what there's like an old saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all? I mean, fairness and beauty went hand in hand. Well, they're not going to say I was beautiful, so I better shoot for being fair. I think in my 30s is when I really began to like covet that as a final closing argument. But that might not be your closing argument. It might not be anybody else's. I'm just encouraging you to figure out kind of where you want to get in life. I mean, think about a navigation device. What do you want to plug in as your destination?
Mm-hmm.
There are 1,000 ways to get there. There are 1,000 ways to get lost. But if you don't know where you're going, then chances are you're not going to get there. And I wish I'd known that when I wish I'd known it when I was your age. So I certainly wish I'd known it when I was in my 20s.
Right. Well, and I appreciate the book because I think it helps individuals. It certainly has helped me realize that when you have a goal in life, or when you have goals in life, then that can guide your decision making. Um, who would you say this book is for? Who would you say you should read this book?
I would have answered that question differently a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
I kind of had in mind um, maybe people your age, maybe people slightly younger, slightly older than you, kind of not just starting their careers. And then I thought, but it can help college kids who are struggling on what to major in. And then I was in California, and this man probably was in his 80s. 2 days ago, I was in California and speaking at Reagan Library, and I did a book signing, and this man was in his 80s. And he said, "Thank you for writing this book." And I figured he meant for like a grandchild or something. And then he looked back at me again, Sharia, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "I needed this even at this point in my life." And I thought, well, of course, you're never too old to change the destination that you want to get to. So it's for anyone who wants to make really good decisions. And it's for anyone, I think, that needs maybe a boost of confidence
Mhm.
in themselves that they can truly be the author of their own destiny.
One of the things that stood out to me in the book was you talk about dreams, and you have what you call lunch hour dreams. And I think the premise is that there are dreams that are attainable, and then there are dreams that may not be as attainable. So tell us about that. What would you like the readers to understand about that point?
Look, I have a vivid imagination, Sharia. I mean, when I'm hitting golf balls on a Saturday afternoon, I sit there and think, well, I've hit three good ones in a row. Maybe I can be on the senior tour. Or, I mean, it's completely irrational. Those guys are fantastic, but we have dreams. I mean, whether it's athletics, whether it's, I mean, I don't know what your dream. I mean, you may have dreamed of being a movie star. I don't know what your dreams were, but I'm sure in the quietness of your own soul, there are things that we kind of use to propel us, to fuel us, that give us excitement. And we're logical and rational enough to know the chances are small, but we can still dream. I think where people get in trouble is where their dream is confused. They confuse it with what is really, really likely to happen, and
Hmm.
they can waste time. So I call it a lunch hour dream. I wrote about a young man that I studied for the bar exam with, and for an hour every day, his dream of being a major league baseball catcher came true over the lunch hour. He was your size, but without your athleticism. I mean, there was no way he was going to be a major league baseball player. There's no way. But yet, he went and got his mitt, and I pitched to him for an hour while we were studying for the bar exam. And I thought, at the time, I thought this is a waste of my hour. I could be sleeping. Why am I out here throwing a baseball to a guy in July in South Carolina? And I look back on it. It was the only part of the day that I remember and the happiest part of the day for him. It didn't consume his life, it didn't derail logic, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I dream of singing at the Grand Ole Opry, or I dream of being spotted on a street one day and saying, you have to be in a movie. There's nothing wrong with thinking about it as long as it doesn't consume us.
Right. One of the, you also talk about having the means when pursuing your dreams, looking at the means, the motives, and the opportunities. And so tell us what do you mean by that? What are the means? What are the motives? And how can you figure out what your opportunities are?
Well, these are two prosecutors talking to one another about means, motive, and opportunity. And the best example is the one I used in the book. a young woman who's a very dear friend of both of ours. Um, she came and applied for a job in the prosecutor's office. So she had the desire, she had the the willingness. She wanted to be a prosecutor, but I frankly, Sharia, did not think there was any chance in the world she was going to be any good at it. So, was there an opportunity? Yeah, there was an opening. Did she have the motive? Yes, she wanted it. Did I think that she was equipped to be a great prosecutor? No, I thought she was like too shy. She wouldn't talk. Her daggone email address was her pet's name, her cat's name. So I'm thinking, you don't even like interact with humans. So how can you be a prosecutor? But we gave her a chance, and she wound up being the best prosecutor that I worked with. She was and is to this day fantastic. Someone gave her an opportunity. She always had the desire. But we do have to be honest with ourselves. I mean, if we love something but we're not good at it, you got to ask ourselves, can we become good at it? And certain things with time and effort, everyone's not born like a great litigator. You can make yourself into a really competent lawyer, but you may not be. I wish I were a great singer. I would love to be the fifth member of the rock band U2. You talk about a dream, that dream's a lot bigger than just a lunch hour dream, too. That's like an obsession. I would love to be the fifth singer. The problem, Sharia, is I can't sing. So not only do I not have the opportunity, I don't have the means. It makes no sense to me for us to mislead ourselves about what we're good at. I understand giving a head fake to other people. I understand maybe presenting a facade to people sometimes in life. I do not understand not leveling with ourselves. So, I mean, when you look at your own life or anyone that's with us tonight, what are you good at? Are you realistically going to have an opportunity to do it? And do you really have a desire? Like, my daughter could be a world-class actress. I mean, that child, when she needs money, it is an Academy Award-winning performance when Abigail needs money. But she doesn't have the desire. She didn't even want to be in school plays. So you got to have all three: means, motive, opportunity. And you have to know yourself well enough to know whether or not you really do have the means, the ability to do what it is you want to do.
Well, how do you kind of figure out, or what's some ways that you can begin to identify and get to know yourself? Because like you say in the book, it's important to figure out, what your closing argument is. But there's a path to determining that, and part of that is, as you write, knowing yourself, knowing your capabilities, and knowing where you can improve or where it's just your lunch hour dream.
Well, I would say two things. Number one, you really do. I'm big into self-awareness. You know that because we've been around each other a lot. I do understand wanting other people to think highly of us. I get that. I do not understand misleading ourselves. So at a certain point, whether we're brushing our teeth or combing our hair, when we're driving in a car by ourselves, it's just us.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I am big on inner dialogue. I am big on having a conversation with ourselves about what we love, what we're good at. If we're not good at it, can we become good at it? Are we willing to invest the time and the effort that it takes? So again, there's what we project to the outside world, and then there's when we close our eyes at night and it's just us. Are we honest with ourselves about all of that? What we love and what we're good at and what we want to get good at. The other thing we need in our lives, I use the example of Nathan in the Bible. We need people in our life who will tell us the truth, even if it's not what we want to hear, and will give us the best advice for ourselves, not what is best for them. And if you have a handful of people in your life, if you're honest with yourself and and your advisors are good, quality, competent, character-laden people, and you learn to tune out the noise which is tough. Social media, I mean, you're a lot younger than I am, so you're more adept at social media, but even your children and my children, they're growing up in a world that I didn't grow up in. All these voices from around the world. Are you wise enough to tune out the noise, the voices that have no business participating in your life story? None at all.
When you talk about a Nathan in the book, can you kind of explain to the viewers here today, what do you mean by that? Who is Nathan, and how does he help you figure out what your closing argument is going to be?
Well, this is where I get really nervous because I'm being interviewed by someone who has forgotten more about the Bible than I will ever know. So if I get this story wrong, just correct me off air, okay?
I'm sure you'll get it.
I don't know if I will or not. But so King David in the Old Testament decides to go up on the rooftop and he sees Bathsheba. And what happens after that are a series of the worst decisions you can possibly make. To send for Bathsheba, to have a relationship that he should not have had with Bathsheba, to send for her husband Uriah the Hittite and bring him back, and then send through Joab a message to let Uriah die in war. So it's adultery, it's conspiracy to commit murder. It's really serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so David's the most powerful man in the land, but his most trusted advisor is a guy named Nathan. So I don't know if you've ever seen a sporting event or you've heard someone yell, "You're the man." I mean, they yell it to Tiger Woods and all the great golfers. And anytime something happens, "You're the man." The first person I can ever find that said that was Nathan to David. He was trying to explain to David using this parable about a man who only had one little calf, one little lamb. And a rich man came and took that lamb. And David burned with anger and said, "As surely as I sit here today, the man who did that will die." And Nathan said, "You are that man." He had someone in his life that said, "You know what? You're the king, but you were wrong. You are wrong." So number one, do we have people in our lives that care enough about us to say you're wrong? Can they say it in a persuasive way? And then back to the rooftop. I mean, David needed some help the first time he saw Bathsheba. He didn't need help after he committed murder. He needed help before it ever happened. Mm-hmm. But you got to leave the room to the rooftop open. People have to feel like they can approach you. You and I have a lot of the same friends. So when I think about the people that have earned the right to talk to me the way that Nathan talked to David, if we have 4 or 5 people that have the key to the rooftop, they can come wherever we are and say, "You need to think about what you are doing," then we are very, very fortunate. But we also have to listen when they come. And that's the story of Nathan. And you can tell me later how I got some of the names wrong, or that it's really in the New Testament and not the Old Testament, or whatever I got wrong.
You did a perfect job.
Thank
and I wouldn't be Nathan in that situation and tell you anything but other than you did a great job. You tell a story in the book about an opportunity that you had to become a magistrate judge. And what stood out to me is this is an opportunity that, as a lawyer, a lot of us would be very excited. And I think the hardest part, especially as you're progressing in your career, is saying no to opportunities. We're kind of trained to think, okay, look for the next opportunity, jump when something good shows up. And so how do you make a decision to say no? Going back to the title of your book, start, stay, or leave. And so how do you decide that, no, it's time for me to stay?
That was a tough one, Sharia, because with a federal judgeship or magistrate judgeship would have come security and financial security, at least for 8 years and probably for longer. And the title that at that point in my life, I really if you're insecure in your profession, you want a title because that title may make you feel better about where you are. The problem is, I had just run for office. I had just asked people to vote for me. And so my father came over and said, "You cannot not keep your commitment. You gave your word. People took a chance on you and elected you the district attorney." And so in my head, I'm saying, well, I have an obligation to my family to do what's best for them. And my father is reminding me, you also have an obligation to keep your word. So I wasn't happy with my dad, even though I knew he was right. And then I had another friend, a guy that's been a friend of mine since I was a kid, Ben Gramling. He kind of put it in different terms. Some things you will have the opportunity to do later in life. It's not the only chance you have to do this. There are certain things you only get one shot at. So you got to decide right then. I mean, what you major in college. I mean, I don't know about you, but my parents were only going to send me once to college. So I had to pick the right major.
Right.
And ironically, I would pick something different. I'm not sure I picked the right major, but I'm not willing to go back to college to fix it. This, my buddy said, you got one chance right now to keep your word to the voters. You'll have other chances in the future to maybe do what he called that judge thing, because he's not a lawyer. He has no clue what he was talking about. But between he and my father, and they motivated me differently. My father, motivated me with a sense of obligation. Ben Gramling motivated me with a sense of logic and opportunity. Passing up. Well, you've had job opportunities in your life that you passed up, and sometimes we look back and think, well, I should have done that. You can't be a prisoner to what you did not do. That's the other thing. I cannot sit here and tattoo U.S. magistrate judge on my arm to remind myself every day that I passed up that chance. And that's not fair to us. So learn from it. I think it was the right decision to not take it. But it's hard. It's hard to pass up on what seems exciting and new. But Sharia, when you're there a week, it's no longer new. It may still be exciting, but it's not new any longer.
Well, I think it's interesting too that you had this opportunity right after making essentially a commitment to the voters, right? But then you had a similar opportunity come later in life, and so you might not. Did you have the same restriction, I guess you could call it, where you had already committed or made a promise to someone else when the opportunity came up again? And if not, how did you decide then that this isn't what I want to do?
Yeah, those two things were about 25 years apart. And I don't recognize the person from 25 years ago. I mean, my dream was always to be, because I viewed life as a pyramid, that I should do things that other people have not done. And then in the process, I can prove that I am somehow special. That's a flawed way of looking at life, but that's how I looked at it for a long time, was what can I do to make the pyramid distinguished from other people's pyramids? And to me, being a federal judge is the pinnacle of our career. So I really, really, really wanted to do that. And then at some point, you decide the pyramid basis for living life is not the right one. It's really a mirror. Do you like what you see in the mirror? Are you proud of what your friends and family see in the mirror? So the second time a judgeship came up, it was no longer the dream of my life to be a judge. That was much easier, ironically enough, to pass that one up than it was to pass up the U.S. magistrate opening. I mean, this one was, both the senators wanted you, the president was the right president, your name was in the White House. It's just not what I saw when I visualized the closing argument for my life. It did not include having been a judge.
One of the things you said tonight, and you also talk about in the book, is, as we walk through life, we're going to make choices. And sometimes looking back, we might not think that was the best choice. An example you gave was you said I would pick a different major, right? To some that might be a major thing, a major decision they are making right now, right? If you have a college student who's reading this book, there's a lot of angst and stress into putting selecting which major you're going to choose. So what can you say to them about, looking back and saying, even if you made the wrong decision, that doesn't necessarily derail you reaching your life goals?
Yeah, the difference between regrets and remembrances. I majored in history. Would I do that all over again? I would have picked English probably or philosophy, but it didn't keep me from getting where I wanted to get. There are 1,000 ways to get. I mean, you hired a lot of young people in Washington. I used to have them come sit down with me. If I don't get into this college or university, my life's over. If I don't get into this law school, my life's over. It's no longer worth living if I don't get this clerkship or this job. I mean, they really honestly think that the choice of where you go to college is going to set the path for the remainder of your life. It cannot be that way. So there are 1,000 ways to get where you want to get. And the difference between looking back with a remembrance or educational remembrance,
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of dwelling on that which cannot be changed. And about the only thing in the world we cannot change is what has already happened.
Right.
So I don't mind admitting to you, I should have majored in what you majored in. I would have enjoyed psychology more, but it does no good to beat myself up over it. I can't change it. Things turned out just fine. So some decisions carry no consequences at all. Some decisions carry temporary consequences, and some decisions carry lifelong consequences. And the more consequence, the more time we should spend trying to make that decision.
Well, you and I could go just continue having a conversation, and I enjoyed talking with you. But I did want to ask some of the questions that some of the readers and the viewers have sent in. And for those of us who are just joining us tonight, if you want to get a signed copy of Trey's new book, Start, Stay, or Leave, you can get your copy at the link below, premiercollectibles.com/Trey Gowdy. So Trey, I'm going to ask you some of the questions we have.
Do I need a lawyer for your questions?
I'll be your lawyer.
Okay. That makes me feel much better. Thank you.
So this first question is from Stephen in North Carolina, and he says, "Hello, Mr. Gowdy. How did you remain so humble and loyal to God and family while in Washington? You are an inspiration, a patriot, and a role model. Thank you."
Well, I want to thank my mom for signing in under the name Stephen from North Carolina. The humility part is really easy because I have a bunch of things to be humble about. So that is not hard. And I also surround myself with people like you and Tim Scott and Johnny Radcliffe and Kevin McCarthy and Mary Langston, who um, that part was easy. Um, you know, this is not popular to say, Sharia. You were there for longer than I was there. Um, you can find what you want to find in Washington. If you want to surround yourself with good people, there are plenty of those there. They may not make the news, they may not be household names, but the people I hung out with um, are people that you would want to be your next door neighbor. You would want them to be teaching your kids. And I called some of their names. I spent a lot of time with Jason Chaffetz before he left. You and I worked together on 3 committees. So if you pick, good quality people, um, then it wound up not being what I wanted to do, but it wasn't because of the people that I was working with. It's just not. It wasn't the closing argument that I wanted for my life. So surround yourself with people that make you better. And you were certainly part of that group that I had in DC. So it's easy to be humble when you're the least talented person at the table. It's very easy to be humble.
Well, I don't think you were the least talented person at the table.
You think Radcliffe? You think Radcliffe was less talented than me? I'm gonna tell him you said that.
I didn't say that. I plead the fifth. This next question is from Michael from California, and he asks, "Trey, how do you find the courage to speak the truth in the modern era of cancellation?"
it just it I mean, speaking the truth, throughout history, people have done it, and there are consequences for doing it. I'd rather deal with the consequences for speaking the truth than the. There are also consequences for not. The older you get, the more you care what a very small group of people think about you, and you don't care that much what others think about you. There are probably 10 people that if they said, I'm really, really disappointed in you, it would crush me. It would crush me because there are people of integrity that I value their opinion. The media, people that haven't met me, people that don't know me, why in the world would we let our lives be ruled by people that don't know anything about us? So maybe it's because being in a courtroom and we always wanted a verdict, which is the truth, to speak the truth,
Mm-hmm.
is not hard because I'd rather deal with the consequence of speaking the truth than the consequence of not. And often there are consequences no matter what you do.
Do you think that the idea of speaking the truth also goes towards how you want to be remembered, and that is fair?
It is hard to be untruthful. I mean, look, I make mistakes. I get facts wrong. But one thing I admire is people who say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. People will forgive you. People will forgive you for saying, I was wrong. I didn't research this enough. I got my facts backwards. What they won't forgive you for is knowingly misrepresenting things to them. And juries will not forgive you for it either. I remember one time, Sharia, I had a bank bag in a robbery case, and I kept referring to it by the wrong color of the bag. I mean, the jury could see this that he is wrong about the color of the bag, but they also knew that I was just not smart. I wasn't being
I
untruthful.
don't think they knew
I
that.
just
I think that's what they thought.
I made a mistake. So people will forgive you unless they think you're intentionally misleading them. Um, so
Well, thank you for that. This next question is from Tim from Montana, and he writes, "What's the biggest nugget of gold you want your readers to take away from your book?"
I would say if I could have people take anything away, it would be to define success in their own terms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and by the same token, define losing by their own terms. I mean, if you and I sat down right now, Sharia, there are probably 10 people that we have relationships with that are thinking about running for the presidency. If we sat down between the two of us, there are 10 people that are at least thinking about it. Of those 10, maybe one, maybe one will be the nominee, and maybe zero will ever be successful unless they redefine the word success. Maybe success is trying. Maybe success is venturing. Maybe success is I want my voice to be heard even if there's not electoral victory. So success is we have all these external voices telling us what a successful life looks like, to be this wealthy or this kind of house or this kind of car or fame. Fame is the big in politics right now. Success and fame are almost interchangeable,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't agree with that. I think integrity is more successful than fame. So the nugget I would ask people to take away is to take authorship of their own lives and how they define what they think a consequential life is. I am married to a woman who was in the who was in the classroom. She was never in politics. She probably could have been on Broadway. She probably could. I mean, she's very talented, as you know.
Yes, very talented.
But she decided to go teach other people's children how to read. So does the world consider that to be as successful as some Broadway star? Maybe not, but I do, and she does. So define success for yourself. let the Nathans help you with it, but black out the voices that have not earned the right to be in your life.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, Trey, but it was one point in the book that I just thought was such a salient point. And that was when you were talking about how you viewed success by kind of like a pyramid. And then, like I said, you touched on it a little bit and talked about how now you're viewing success is a mirror. When I look in the mirror, am I happy? Am I satisfied with the person that I am? And I just thought that that was such a good point because, as you've mentioned, we have so many different definitions of success that we're bombarded with every day. You just don't, it's hard to determine, well, which one should I follow? How did you what helped you progress from looking at as climbing a pyramid and being at the top of the pyramid versus making sure when I look in the mirror at night, I'm happy with the person I see?
I think if I were being honest with you, Sharia, I would say I had the luxury of having a job that was the one I wanted people to judge me by.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that job between the ages of 29 and maybe 45. Prosecutor was the job that I wanted. It was not Congress. It wasn't a chairmanship. It wasn't leadership in the House. It wasn't being on television. So it's kind of liberating when you've already had the job that you want people to judge the success of your life by.
Right.
And so when I just kind of quit letting other people say, yeah, but you got to run for attorney general, or yeah, it was great that you were, a little county DA, but don't you want to be Bill Barr? Don't you want to be Jeff Sessions? Don't you want to be Merrick Garland? Don't you want to be the attorney general? Because that to them is a bigger deal. But it's not to me. So when you can say, okay, this is it. I have found what I want. To the extent people are going to remember anything, I have found what I want them to remember. And I remember sitting there thinking, all right, my buddies are filing through the line, telling Terry how sorry they am that I played golf in a lightning storm and am dead. So what do I want them to say? And it was not Congress, and it wasn't television, and it wasn't a podcast, and it's not being an author. I wanted them to say he was a really good prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have already done that, it's liberating. It's like you're playing with house money from there on out because that's the identity you wanted. And when I figured that out, the pyramid went away and I was content with the old man I saw in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It's liberating. It's freeing.
You also have a very good imagination. I wasn't quite sure where you were going with the playing golf in a lightning storm.
Well, if I got to pick the way I went, I mean, I try not to play in a lightning storm, but
right.
I mean, that would be much better than, a meteorite hitting me when I'm walking down to get the morning newspaper.
That is very true. So another question we have is from Kennedy in Michigan. Kennedy writes, what's a piece of advice you would give to a new grad wanting to pursue a career in politics?
I would say have a really honest conversation with yourself about why. Mm-hmm. Why politics? And I would ask them to define what they mean by politics. Do they mean appointed office? Do they mean what you did? I mean, you were the highest staff level you can possibly get in the House of Representatives. You weren't elected, but that's the highest you can get, is to be a staff director. Do you mean that? Or do you really, really, really want to be on the ballot and have people say, okay, between these two bad choices, this one's less bad? So, I mean, kids come to me all the time. They tell me they want to. I'm not saying the person who asked this question feels this way, but a lot of kids say, I really, really want to help people. I want to go into politics. Mm-hmm. I'll say, well, then you need to go teach school. If you want to help people, then go teach them to do something they can't already do. Go do almost anything else. To be in the House, you're one of 435 people. So unless you have 217 people helping you, you're not doing anything. And in the Senate, it's a little bit better, but you still got to have, 49 plus the vice president.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say help people, there are 1,000 ways to help people that do not involve politics. So have an honest conversation with yourself about what draws you to that. And the answer may be, Sharia, I've always wanted to be on a ballot. And that's a fine reason. There's nothing wrong with that. But at least be honest with yourself that I'm not really doing this to, quote, help the community. I'm doing this because it's something I've always wanted to do.
Right.
You may not want to tell the voters that.
No.
But you got to be honest with yourself about what's motivating you and why you think it's so important to be able to say that I mean, how many people you and I know that were in the house and now they're out? So, so whatever you get doesn't last. I mean, the most you can be the president is 8 years. So you're the leader of the free world. And at the end of 8 years, you're looking for a job or a book contract or something. So again, I understand like wanting other people to think more highly of us than we probably deserve. I do not get not being honest with ourselves.
And that's the point that you make throughout the book, is that being honest with yourself. So having a clear assessment of who you are, what your capabilities are, is really what's going to help you as you make these life choices, as you decide to start something, decide to stay where you are, or decide to leave. So I guess the last question I wanted to ask you was, how did you make that decision to leave Congress?
Well, I was going to leave sooner, as you know, and I want you to sit there like you don't know this story, but you do know the story. I was going to leave sooner, but I have a weakness for friendship. And Tim Scott will preach my funeral whenever that comes. So he is someone that I care very much about. He asked me to stay for one more term so we could run together. He was up for the U.S. Senate for his own 6-year gig, and in our state, that's a really, really big deal that he would be on the ballot statewide.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that it wasn't part of my closing argument. I knew. I mean, Sheree, if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Mary Langston. I mean, two people that are, going to read the Bible at my funeral, assuming y'all aren't part of killing me. That's my one caveat. Assuming y'all don't kill me, I want you reading the Bible. So I would have met people I never would have met. So, and for that, I am grateful.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the work, it was not nearly as fulfilling as being in a courtroom on behalf of the victims of crime. And I got a third of life in the windshield if I'm lucky. I got 2/3 in the rearview mirror. Why am I doing a job I don't enjoy? I'm away from people that I love. I'm sleeping on a couch in a town that I don't even know my way around. So why am I doing this?
Right.
So someone at the grocery store will say congressman. So you can, I mean, why are you doing it? And I would have left sooner, but it's Tim Scott's fault.
Well, we need Tim Scott. I just wanted to ask you one last question from some of our viewers. And just, again, for those of us who may have just joined us, you see that link down at the bottom that says premiercollectibles.com -- Trey Gowdy. If you'd like to get a signed copy of his new book, Start, Stay, or Leave, make sure you go to that link and order your copy. So this question is from Hannah from Maryland. And Hannah writes, what are obvious factors that we forget about that causes indecision?
Indecision, self-doubt. I think I know a lot of people who just don't trust their decision-making metrics. I mean, it's either low self-esteem or they don't. Some people don't think that that they deserve to be happy or that they are entitled to be happy. Some people just have been have heard all these other voices about what success is. Success is, having 2.7 children and having this kind of a job and this kind of a house. So indecision also can come from not being um, a competent gatherer of facts.
Right.
I like logic. You've heard me say that many, many, many times. I'm not minimizing emotion. Emotion's important. Um, but logic, intuition, common sense, and emotion in the right proportion is what drives our decision. So if there's a deficiency in there, then you're going to be indecisive. When I talk, and I have people in my life that are and when I mean indecisive, I mean I live with someone who takes longer to order an appetizer than I would to buy a car, and that would be my wife. So it's not a lack of confidence in her. It's like, well, if I pick this, I can't have this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to make it easy for her. I say, honey, you can order every appetizer there is. You don't have to just pick one. You can have them all. If you'll just order before the restaurant closes, you can have them all. So what drives your indecision? Is it a lack of facts? Is it a lack of confidence? Or is that nagging lack of peace that is really telling you maybe you should proceed cautiously there? Sometimes indecision is good. It's a lack of confirmation.
Right.
And it means that maybe we should be cautious.
Right. All right, Trey. Well, we've come to kind of a little bit of what I think is a fun part as well. And this is just to help the viewers and the readers know a little bit more about you. And I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. As a list of 22 questions, but I won't ask you all of those. But where were you born?
I was born in the city you live in, Sharia, in Greenville, South Carolina, when my father was doing his pediatric residency. And then when the people in Greenville saw me and met me, they demanded that I move to Spartanburg, which I did when I was like 4 years old. But I was born in Greenville.
Okay. If you had a movie made about your life, who would you want to play you in the movie?
Oh my heavens. Who would I want to play me? Well, my life would not really be like, it would be a comedy. So, I mean, who would I like for the courtroom part of it? I mean, you know who I'm going to say. I saw him in A Time to Kill. He was a litigator, Matthew McConaughey, in A Time to Kill. But I mean, honestly, who's like an old actor that's over the hill? I mean, that's who would do best playing me right now. Just whoever's over the hill and old and has white hair.
Oh, that's not true.
Who would that be? Who would that?
That was not true.
Who's the guy from Luther? Idris Elba?
Yes.
I love him. I love him. I wouldn't mind if he played it.
I like that. I like that decision. What was your first job? I think you talk about it a little bit in the book, but what was your first job?
Well, my father made me cut grass for our neighbors, but he did not think I should be paid for it. He thought that sometimes neighbors just do nice things. So is it a job if you're not paid for it?
I think as a child, when your parents tell you to do something, it's a job.
My first job was when I was old enough to walk, when my father told me to go do something. I think my first real job was delivering newspapers on a motorized bicycle. I had a morning paper route when I was 13 or 14.
And you and I share an affinity for the best animal in the world, and that's a dog. And I know that you have dogs. What are your pets' names?
We, throughout the course of my marriage and having 2 children, we've had 3. Well, we now have 4. Judge was our first dog. He lived about 12 years. Then we had Jury, who was a cockapoo, and he lived to be 18 years old. And then we had Bailiff, and he was a black lab, and he lived to be 12. And then I surprised my wife with a little puppy named Justice. Um, she didn't know he was coming. She didn't know we were getting another dog, but he came from Washington State. He's they call him a dire wolf. They're not wolves. They look like wolves.
Hmm.
The sweetest disposition. So we have one now named Justice, and our daughter, although Dallas does not live with us, Dallas is like a grand dog, like having a child that's a dog. So we've had four. They're amazing, as you know. They're like kids, except they listen.
Yeah, that's very true. They are like children, except they listen and they love you unconditionally. They're never upset with you.
They unconditionally, and they want to play no matter how hard it's raining or how
Right.
cold it is outside.
That's very true. Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you about your book, Start, Stay, Lead. Is there anything else you want to share with our viewers before we say goodnight?
Yeah, thank everyone for joining us, and thank you for Sharia for reading it. I mean, you have three young children, a full-time job. How you have time to read it? I mean, I'd actually forgotten parts of it were in the book. So if I sounded surprised at some of your questions, it's because my memory is old, and you may have read it more recently than I have. I want this to help people. And
Mhm.
I wish I had read something like this when I was younger, and I wish I'd been able to write something like this when I was younger. But
Mhm.
people don't have to make the same mistakes I made. There's nothing in the world requires us all to make the same mistakes. So hopefully it helps people, and they can go lead the most consequential, successful as they define it life they can, because we only get one shot at it, this gift called life. So we need to be a good steward of it.
Well, thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you for your time tonight, and we'll just say goodnight to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'll
Yeah.
talk to
Thank
you
you,
later, Trey.
Sharia. And thank you, everyone. All right. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Hey, this is John Acuff, New York Times best-selling author of 7 books and someone who's done a live signing. If you like the one you just watched, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. It's full of amazing authors having great conversations and signing books for viewers just like you. So make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching today.